Welcome to As the Story Grows. I'm Brian Patton. Today, Brian Wille, frontman for Currents, joins the podcast. Currents' new record, The Death We Seek, is out today on SharpTone Records. Brian talks about the split in Connecticut between the New York and New England scenes, working hard to make music work for him, finding an audience during COVID lockdowns, polarization, and more. Currents hits the road starting next week, and Brian and I talked about the bill for that tour, and it sounds like a great time. Make sure you check out the new album and then grab some tickets to see Currents live. Enjoy today's chat with Brian Wille from Currents.
Growing up, I was I guess your average kid, right? I had like a couple friends, you count them on one hand for a little while, at least the good ones, the real ones,
Yeah.
I guess pretty standard. Like you got your friends, you got your bullies, you got your, your problems, but you got your good stuff too. And I found like, my parents my mom specifically was always into like, I guess like rock, like hard rock and stuff. Like she followed like the Stones when she was younger, just like on the road and all that. And that's so funny. But like, she always like liked music. She always loved it. We were always playing music. She was a dance instructor. So she would, like she was a nurse, but she was also like a dance instructor when she was going through school. And, so she's always like, would always have like, dance parties at the house on like good days and stuff.
Nice.
And we're always playing like music of different kinds. And I started gravitating towards like, heavier music kind of early, I guess. And, like it all kind of started there. And I always knew I wanted to like do something with music, like whatever the instrument was. I didn't really take a shine to like many instruments growing up. I tried drums, tried guitar, all that stuff. Just didn't really work out. And then, I think I tell the story all the time, but it was like Linkin Park I found was like, that thing. And I always looked at like Mike Shinoda, like Chester was like one thing, right? But like something about how he would like hype the crowd up and all that stuff. Like I always just thought that was cool. And I was like, oh, that'd be fun to like do that. Like, and then I started seeing screaming as more of like an avenue to like get into at least like some sort of thing. Like maybe this could be my instrument if I could learn how to do it. Cause I see these people, they're doing it. They're like screaming, but they're also like singing and all that stuff. So, there must be something to it. Like it can't be all just like pain and suffering for these guys. And, so once I learned it, just started getting in bands and, I started getting a little more comfortable with myself. The bullies went away because, I had this cool thing that I was doing now. And, but you get pushed by like a friend. Like I didn't do anything in front of anybody until, like this one friend, we were playing like Guitar Hero or something, and like Screaming Fire comes on, and I do like the scream and like with like some like terrible fry, and he's like, "Dude, you're sick. That's crazy. You should join a band." And I'm like, "No way." And then he had like friends that were trying to get a band going that were like a totally different friend group than mine. Like I was just like we call them like Skittles, like people that had friends kind of everywhere, but like didn't really have like a specific friend group, just kind of floaters. And these kids were kind of with the skater group of people, but you could also call them Skittles, I guess. And he kind of like linked us up, this mutual friend of ours, and that was my first band, and the rest is history. Like it's not the same band. I've had like 5-6 bands from that point until Currents, and then now we're here.
That's right. Yeah. There's like a line somewhere in the generation gap, people younger than me, where it's like at some point Linkin Park becomes like the band where you're just like, oh my God, screaming in music. And like,
yeah, it was like, or even just like they were kind of my inspo in general. They had that Live in Texas DVD. I was actually just talking about this with somebody else recently, where Mike Shinoda says, I forget which one of them it was, if it was Chester or Mike, if they were kind of both like riffing off each other when they were talking about it, but they say something to the effect of, you know, how many like aspiring musicians are in here, and everyone's like, woo, and they're like, yeah, you know, persevere, believe in yourselves, and one day you'll be up here with us, or Metallica, or Limp Bizkit, or whatever. And I feel like I took that to heart, where I was like, oh yeah, I mean, guess you could, you know, you just, I don't know. I was like a little kid though, and then you know, life went on, and they were right.
Yeah, yeah. What was the scene like there in Fairfield? Was there a pretty good scene? So
the band, it's like kind of a, I don't want to say a misconception. Maybe it is. I don't know where the Fairfield thing came from. We're from like we're from Fairfield County, which is like Fairfield is in Fairfield County, obviously. But like I grew up in Bethel, and then the band kind of originated in Newtown. A couple members were from Ridgefield, but this is all like Fairfield County anyway. So
just got consolidated.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I mean, the scene in general, I would say Connecticut wide, it's a small state, right? Like super small, but there were pockets of the scene that never really interacted with each other. You had like the Western Connecticut area that was kind of more lumped in with like New York. And that was where I was like, you would kind of go in between the Heirloom Arts Theater for shows, or like Brewster Legion Hall, or the Loft in Poughkeepsie. And then people that would go to those shows would kind of intermingle, and like the Heirloom would kind of be the meeting point of all of those kids for Connecticut at least. And then, you know, you had other venues. You had like Tuxedos and stuff in Danbury, which was like right next to Heirloom. It was just like a higher capacity, but it wasn't owned by the same people or anything. And then you had the whole northern Connecticut scene, like that was kind of like bordering Massachusetts and like Rhode Island and all that. And that general area there seemed to kind of like, it was like a larger portion of the scene, but just a little harder to have access to. But they were, I would say, a little bit more established than like our side was. But our side did have Currents, which was cool. Like I remember when I first started playing shows, I met Currents pretty early on, and they were like the clear, you know, they were the band that people like kind of cared about the most on that side of the state. And like they had the most kind of pull. There was another band called like Cursed by Reason at the time that was also like kind of like the older generation of that. And then Currents kind of just like took the helm of that kind of fan base and like that kind of crew. And, you know, they kind of became like the new kids in a sense. But yeah, there was like local shows all the time, you know, between like the Max, like the Amity Teen Center. You had like a bunch of venues up in like, you know, northern Connecticut and stuff that, you know, I only got to see that like a little bit kind of when I was growing up. But yeah, scene was pretty good. You had a lot of cool like local bands and stuff, and the lineage there just in that like New England area in general is crazy. Like New England metal and hardcore is like such a big thing. So yeah, I don't know. The scene is cool, and I think it was kind of inspired by like those bigger bands that were really like making the moves and making it happen and getting like the scene on the map.
Nice. Yeah, I was going to ask if you identified with the New England or the New York, but yeah, as soon as you said it was split into two, I was like half New England, half New York.
Yeah, like growing up, I was like, you know, I was a little more familiar with like the Hudson Valley scene and all that, just because that was kind of where I grew up. And then I would go to shows at the Heirloom Arts Theater because it was like walking distance from my house, and I would like work concessions there sometimes. My friend Justin would book there, kind of toward the end of its time. But that was like what the Heirloom was essentially like the old Empress Ballroom, which is I guess kind of a famous thing in the area. But I had never gotten to experience it as the Empress. It was just a little before my time of like going to shows, I guess.
Down and forget when I would try to isolate with assassinate, but I just can't find release for all the pain in my heart and the ache it causes me. I bleed out for the people who've forgotten me. It's time to say what rests in my mind. Ever since I fell to pieces, I never crossed.
How'd you end up in Currents?
So that friend, I guess, that I started the first band with, we would kind of just like that band, we would just mess around and like play Asking Alexandria covers in a garage and then just like prank call people. Like it was not a serious band, but we had fun doing it. We never got to play shows or anything as that band. But the main friend the person that kind of wanted to like continue playing music that was from that band, my friend JR, he was like, oh, hey, I might have an offer to join this band, and they're looking for a vocalist too, because the guitar player wants to just like stop doing vocals and he just wants to play guitar. Mm-hmm. So he was like, if you want to, like, we can play shows, like, let's do it. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. So I met them, and like we kind of had like a sit down, did like a little audition sort of thing, I guess. I was kind of just like in the band, and then we started playing shows as Divide the Universe. I met my friend Justin there. Shout out Justin Leach. He mass concerts now, but he used to book at the Heirloom Arts Theater and like various other venues and stuff. Yeah. But he mainly does the Worcester Palladium and the Webster Theater now, and he's like our guy essentially. But so I met Justin through that band, and we would basically just go around playing shows. That's how I met Currents. And then, Divide the Universe kind of broke up and reformed as another band, and that band started playing more shows. And that was kind of where we started getting a little bit more like recognition in the local scene, so to speak, as the Tail of My Defeat. That was the name of that band. And that was kind of how I met the guys in Currents. And Ryan, who was in this band Forsaken at the time, was like a super heavy, like crazy deathcore band. And, we all kind of knew each other and would hang out and like go to Denny's after shows and all that stuff. And, it was a good time. And then the Tail of My Defeat ended. Sorry. And, I was kind of just like floating. I was doing a project with Justin, trying to do Tail of My Defeat a little bit with JR here and there. And then, I had various other projects. I met Chris Wiseman doing, I knew him through his other band, Senseless, that was like kind of doing things around the same time as us, and we were playing some of the same shows. And, like we joined this project together that kind of just ended up falling apart and not doing anything. But we kind of made a pact then of like, yeah, let's stick together, And so we, me, Justin, and Chris were trying to do a project, and then I didn't really go anywhere. Because Chris ended up getting offered to join Currents. So he did. And then, I'm kind of just like, all right, well, I'm going to keep trying, and just, did this, did that, and basically just moved around and tried to jam with as many people as possible and like make music, write music. And eventually I was about to kind of give up, and but I was still having fun. And like Jeff, who was the drummer of Currents at the time, he wanted to do kind of like this pop punk thing. And we started doing that a little bit, and that didn't really go anywhere. But then the conversation started happening of like, they knew that the vocalist of Currents at the time, Patrizio, was planning to, probably stop being in Currents. Like he was kind of over it, like didn't really want to be there, and wanted to move on with his life. Right. And they kind of knew, and they were saying like, hey, like if he stops, like you're the guy. And I was just like, shut up. Like, don't say that to me. Like that's messed up. Like, but they were serious. And then, I'm at New England Metal and Hardcore Festival, and, I get this cryptic text message that says, oh, hey, we're having a talk tonight. Are you ready? And I was like, what are you talking about? I guess. Yeah. I don't know what you're talking about, but cool. And then I get like 3 missed calls, and then I answer back like a little while later, and Jeff's like, oh yeah, you're in the band. And I was like, oh, great. And then day 2 of New England Metal and Hardcore, like 3 of my friends already knew, and they're like, oh, you're in Currents. And I'm like, how do you know? But it's pretty cool.
That's awesome. That's awesome. All that time while you were trying to like make bands work, was that like high school, or were you going to college, or just like working and trying to make the music thing stick?
I was post high school. That was a scary time. Well, not really. It was fun, but like, it was like, I knew what I wanted to do when I was kind of getting out of high school. I was like senior year, and I was like, yeah, I want to do this. I want to, like, I was already playing in a band, and I had like that whole thing where I'm like, well, this is fun and I feel like I could do it. So I want to just try. And I never had like the college bug really when I was like in high school. Like, you know, you had like your, what was it, Naviance or whatever, like the program was that they were having kids go in and like pick their colleges and like, all that stuff. Yeah. And I'm like, you know, I'm sitting in there and I'm like, I don't really know if I want to do any of this stuff at all. And it just didn't appeal to me at the time. And I kind of was like, well, if I really don't want to do this, but I know that I want to do this and I have like an idea of how I could maybe do it, then I might as well just try and like go for it, because I could always go back to college, right? And so I spent a lot of that time. I worked as like a delivery driver for a pizza place, and like at the same time a delivery driver for like this sandwich place, and then I get a job at a mall at like a Spencer's, and I stayed there for like 5 years. And all in that time, like, you know, it was like a period of like, you know, easily like 4 or 5 years that I was just kind of working whatever job I was working at the time, and like playing in bands and playing shows, and you know, just trying to make something happen, like something. And that was like, it's like that weird limbo time where you're just like learning things and like getting to know people and like playing shows and just having fun. And you know, it kind of toward when I was just about to like throw in the towels when it you know, finally made it happen.
Every like overnight success or just like band that explodes on the scene, it's like there's always this grinding and history and backstory of just like it was really fucking hard.
Yeah, and it's funny too, because that was like a whole block of time, right? Like a whole like 4 or 5 years. But then once you get into the band, like, you know, it doesn't stop. It doesn't get easier. You just get a new set of grind that you have to do. And, you know, like from that point, that was like 2015 when I joined the band. It is 2023 now, and I think we started like full on touring like 2 years after I joined. So like it's been, you know, even more than that amount of time, just continuing to make different things happen, you know.
Right. How'd you guys get connected with SharpTone?
So we got connected early on with this guy named Scott Lee, who essentially is New England Metal and Hardcore. And I find it funny that I was at New England Metal and Hardcore Festival when I got the call that I was joining Current, because he was that festival. Like, he was the guy. He was he's easily, you know, the most established, like connected person in the Northeast region. Like, he's the guy that, like, you know, like this legendary dude, like anybody that I knew that knew what they were talking about and knew kind of how to make it happen, they knew that Scott Lee was the guy. And pretty early on, I was talking to Jeff when, you know, we were kind of getting like, there was an inkling that I would be like joining the band. And he was saying, Scott is like interested in us. And like his assistant at the time, this guy Kyle, was like kind of helping the band out and stuff. And, you know, just kind of being like he was like the pre-Scott, so to speak, like where Kyle was kind of taking us on as like, you know, his band that he was like managing and like, you know, essentially just taking care of, just trying to put in like a favorable positions to succeed, so to speak. And because he knew the value of the band and that there was like something there. And, you know, that kind of connection early on got it to where Scott really noticed that something was up. And, you know, once the vocalist switch kind of happened, it came a little bit more to Scott's attention as like this, you know, kind of interesting thing that was happening. And it all kind of hinged on having decent music leading up to, you know, with like the new guy. Like, if the band is bad now, then like that sucks. But if the band is good, then, you know, okay, we can make things happen with this. And so there was that kind of thing of like, you know, okay, this is our real just push it moment. Let's like make something really sick and like get everybody on board with the project. Kind of like Shark Tank essentially, but like it was pretty funny. And you know, we wrote the song Withered, and it was enough where it was like, okay, this is a thing that can work. Let's do this. And so, that was kind of how we got hooked up with like Scott and Kyle and all that pretty early on. And from that point, it was a little bit of like back and forth. Like the band was already kind of talking to labels here and there and stuff. They, got an offer from this label or that label, and it wasn't like good, or like, they got ghosted, or like whatever the drama, it's typical stuff. And then Scott is like, hey, interesting thing. There's this guy used to work for Sumerian Records, and he is starting a new record label, and he's interested in the band, and got us like essentially a contract. And we look at it and we're like, oh, this is pretty good. I mean, we don't know what this is, but it's pretty good. And so we kind of had the thing like signed already before we like really met him. And then we meet him, and then he basically like unveils his entire plan on us of like, I have this band. And we're like, oh my God. Yeah. And so it was kind of just like an easy clap from there. Nice. And the rest is history.
You guys released The Way It Ends, June of 2020. Great time to put out an album. What was the process leading up to putting that out? Was there delay in the actual release date? Was there conversation about delaying it more? Or was it just like, we have this record, we're proud of it? There's a void, kind of, as a lot of people held on to their music for so long. And I know, like, when I talked to Rory from Dayseeker, he talked about Sleep Talk being like a pandemic record that people attach themselves to because like it filled this moment. Like, talk to me about that process.
Yeah, so there was definitely talk of putting that record on hold. There was because there was bands that were doing it at the time where like, they had a record that they had pretty much almost finished or was finished, and they were like, okay, well, we don't know what's happening with the world right now. Let's just kind of take a beat and let's just wait, and we'll put this out in a more secure time. There was, concern of being able to get vinyl at the time. There was concern of being able to get this or that, or like even just be able to gather, tour, obviously, on like a record. And the reality of our situation was that we were already, we had the Place I Feel Safest, before that in 2017. And there was already like a little bit of attention on our band at that point where like, we had people that was kind of around the time where we released that record and not much happened right away. I mean, we had some really cool tours and stuff lined up like during that time, but as far as like commercially and like outside of like what we were like immediately seeing, there wasn't much happening. Yeah. But when we were doing The Place I Feel Safest, there was kind of just like this slow climb, like after it came out, where all of a sudden like people on Reddit are just talking about it all the time. And there was this like weird, like sudden like sleeper growth of the band where we knew we had eyes on us in this moment, right? And we think like, okay, The Way It Ends, this is going to be like our like big boom, and then COVID happens and we're on tour, basically like leading up, we had like a single out already for it, and the tour gets cut short by like a few days and we go home, and then obviously that 3 months turns into 5 months, 5 months turns into a year, and then 2 years and whatever. But we didn't know much about that at the time. And when we were having the conversation of if the record should get pushed back, we already had, I think, 2 singles out. We had a release date, pre-orders were up. And it's just like, nah, like we can't, it's too late. Like we can't do it, because if we do that, it's just a punch in the face to anybody that like actually cares about our band. Mm-hmm. So we're going to put it out, and, we're going to see what happens. We didn't even get to film music videos for it, just because of like the nature of things, just where everybody was like scared of catching COVID and dying. So obviously like, that your life comes first and your health and all that. So, yeah, it was like, we put it out anyway, and it ended up being like a favorable experience, I think, for everybody. Like, you know, it was kind of in that same realm. There was like not that much going on outside of like, like Dayseeker and like Spirit Box and stuff like that. So, I think we ended up in a pretty fortunate situation where it ended up kind of being a soundtrack for people as opposed to like something that just didn't get to like have its day.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like that 21, 22, there was like a wealth of music, but like the records that came out 2020, like, I don't know, probably will stick with people emotionally because like they mean something very differently.
Yeah. It's a time and a place for sure.
Yeah. The Way It Ends too. It's a good title for a COVID record.
So creepy and weird. We had no idea.
No idea. Yeah. We followed it up. This new record, The Depth We Seek. So equally positive.
Yes. Yeah. Always sunshine, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Talk to me about the writing process for this. I mean, at what point were you guys like, all right, like we just released a record, but like we got nothing else going on. How quickly are you back into writing and working on music?
It took us like a hot minute. Like we started, well, yes and no, I guess. So we release The Way It Ends in 2020, but it was already like recorded and stuff around like 2019 ish. And so then, you know, it takes a little while for a record to come out once you write it. So then by the time, usually our arc, I guess, is like something will come out. And then by the time that record comes out, we don't necessarily have the new record done, but we're kind of starting it. Like we're getting started right around the time that like the previous one is like getting released and people are hearing it for the first time. Okay. So, that little period is fun too, because you kind of get like reinvigorated on the stuff that, you know, is on that record. Like when we're doing The Way It Ends and we're doing the mix and the master and all this stuff and coming up with the album art and like you're doing like all the press and like all that stuff, it's like you almost lose sight a little bit of like what it is that you did. And then when like people really hear it for the first time and you start really talking about it again, it like reminds you like, oh yeah, this was awesome. Like, you know, like I really like this and I'm glad other people are liking it too. So you get kind of like that little spark again where you're like, oh cool. Like, you know, feeling good, feeling confident. Let's get in and let's make some more stuff. So I'd imagine that's kind of where we're going to be for this one. But anyway, Way It Ends comes out. We are just kind of doing whatever. And Chris starts kind of like putting some stuff together and like, like he puts together the title track, like The Death We Seek. And we are kind of immediately like, oh, okay, this is pretty sick. And, you know, he kind of just keeps going from there. And, you know, about a year plus goes by. And now it's time, I think it was December 2021 that we got in and got to the studio to record The Death We Seek. And now, yeah, like it's about a process of like a year and a half or so of like writing songs. And then up to that point, like we'll usually decide that we're ready to go in and like get the production of it done, or at least like take it to like Ryan or whoever we have as like our producer and really fine tune everything.
Where'd the title of the record come from?
So we had the lyric, you know, we found the death we seek. And for whatever reason, that kind of just stuck out to everybody. Like it ended up being the title of that song. And then when we were going through and we were like listening to the record and stuff, I had always had that in my mind as track one, you know, like that is like what we are going to start the record with. And that is what people are going to hear like for the first time that we release music in a while. Cause it felt like a pretty, it felt like a nice continuation of the themes and the overall energy of The Way It Ends. Like, and it makes sense because it was written basically hot off the heels of it coming out, as it was like, this is going to encapsulate it almost felt like a bonus track of the way it ends, not in a bad way, but it felt like, just kind of the last hoorah of that cycle, so to speak. And so it felt natural for that to be kind of the first thing that people are going to hear coming back, because it is so reminiscent. But when it came to naming the record, it stuck out more than anything else that we had, and we had, had a couple other name ideas, and nothing that really stuck, and nothing that's really memorable to this point. Like, I don't remember any of the other names. But it just felt like the best summation of the vibe and the energy, and for it to be the title just made sense.
Were there lyrical themes you wanted to tackle on this record coming out of, not that you wanted to write about the pandemic, but like whether it was like therapy or just like insulated time alone in your head? Like, did that influence your lyrics?
I would say it had to. Whether I was really thinking about it or not, there was certain things that I was kind of writing about. But when I'm going in and trying to put an entire sheet of lyrics together for a record, or just for a song at that, or even like a part, I'm not really thinking about what it is I'm writing about. I'm just trying to do it as like objectively as possible, and just let the best thing come out. Whatever I first think, whether I think it makes sense in the context of the song or not, it's going there. Okay. And because I'm a big proponent of like your first impression and your first thought is usually the one. It's usually like that thing, because that is the most natural thing that just came to you. And obviously you'll tweak things from there, and not all of your first ideas are going to be like good, right? Or like, but like within reason. But yeah, the themes of each song will kind of like come with the tweaking of things. It's like, that's when I'll kind of start curating what the overall message and meaning, so to speak, is going to be. And I just try to make sure that everything is like consistent with it itself. And you look at line to line and like, does this make any sense? Does this not make any sense? And that's just a process of like, I've just been writing lyrics for so long that like now it's starting to feel a little bit more cohesive. But I guess as far as like topics go, I didn't want to be like too on the nose about like any COVID stuff.
Right.
That's just kind of weird. And like, I hate when things are too like meta, so to speak. And like when things are too like, I guess on the nose, like break the fourth wall. Like I don't like that. And I think music is, it's a form of escapism. So it should not feel like you're getting a rundown of like these like real world events that just happened that everybody is like constantly been talking about, traumatized by. So, anything that I wrote, I just want to focus more on like the feeling of the thing and not like the thing itself. Like Remember Me as an example, where that song is kind of COVID central, but it's not really, it's not direct. Like it's kind of about the relationships fracturing based on, kind of like the divides that people started having. It's like mask versus no mask, this guy versus that guy, like this party versus that party. Like everything just became this divisive argument. And like it got to the point where it's like, like whatever you see in your echo chamber of like your phone or your friends or whatever, versus whatever like your aunt or your uncle or your cousin or something on theirs. And, you spend time away from each other and you kind of just get this entire new, different perspective of like the events of the last 2 years. And like, it's like seeing the same thing and having a completely different perspective of that thing, which is human and it's natural. But I think it was like to a ridiculous point in that like 2020, 2021 kind of period of time. And so that was kind of what that song was about, was this like, I don't want to lose my relationships with my family over just nonsense,
right,
you know?
Right.
And didn't, obviously.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, that was kind of what that song was about. And it was like just trying to take things to the extreme a little bit with like whatever the feeling was, and just try to go there with things, even if it wasn't truly what I felt about the matter. I just wanted to be as like, you know, as emotive and as extreme as possible.
Yeah. Who did the album artwork?
So there's a guy named Jim Hughes, and Jim is awesome. Jim does a lot of our merch designs. He did the art for I Let the Devil In, like that EP. And then, we trusted him with this little project here. That's awesome.
Did you guys give him direction, or just does he have free reign to?
Yeah, it was a pretty intense concept, I guess. And then he kind of took his liberties with certain elements. But the way that it worked was we had a situation where we like had him do like a lot of the single art for the record. And we were just kind of like blown away by it. And like, he just seemed to capture the energy and the vibe that we were looking for, like perfectly. Like, it's like, I think when we saw the art for The Death We Seek, that was kind of just what cinched it for us. We're like, Jim has to do the cover, because this is just too perfect. And like, there's no way that we're going to find any other way to like have the same feel thematically if it's not just him all the way through. So like, we went for it. And, you know, like the concept essentially was, you know, we wanted to have this futuristic sort of character coming out of the void, essentially, that was left on The Way It Ends. And, you know, he's standing on basically like this destroyed society that, you know, we would assume has been destroyed by the events of, you know, The Way It Ends. And without going too crazy into it, like that was like kind of the basis of the idea. And I had this entire treatment of like a story that was like written up to kind of be like an inspiration. And, you know, he kind of just took it and was like, yep, cool. And brought it to us. And we're like, that's perfect.
Because I've been listening to the whole discography and prepping to talk to you, like this record sounds a whole lot beefier and like heavier than your previous work, but like there's a lot more melodic elements and singing on this record than your previous stuff. Was that intentional?
Yeah, I don't want to say it was intentional, so to speak, but I guess on the Chris side of things, like I'm sure, like, you know, he is like the main instrumental composer of the band. Like he's the guy that, you know, does all of the, you know, he'll like write the guitars, he'll like program the drums and all that stuff. And Matt came in on this record and he, you know, added his touch to drums and like tracked the drums himself. So, you know, all credit to him, obviously. But like Chris is the guy that makes the songs essentially. And then I go in and then I write the lyrics and try to capture like the energy and the emotion that he's conveying musically as much as I can. So to that point, you know, there's a certain structure that goes along with that where, you know, like, you know what the verse is, you know what the chorus is, you know what the bridge is, you know where he's going with it. And you kind of know what he wants you to do essentially. So I would just use the songs as like the guide and just do whatever I thought made the most sense on each part. And that was kind of that. But to a certain point, there's songs where like I knew that I could kind of take it somewhere that like I haven't been able to before. Like you have songs like Over and Over or like So Alone, where you know, it has room to have this like just open like chorus that is pretty accessible, right? And like it gets me kind of doing like a little more than I would normally do, or at least being a little more like forefront than I normally would be. And that was pretty cool. And those kind of both draw on like, I guess, different influences, so to speak, but they kind of have that same energy and vibe, which I'm really proud of. And then on the heavy side of things, we just went full on. We just went dumb. We went crazy. We figured like give the lows some shine and get some highs in there, and just try to like, because we always had like highs and lows of, you know, different pitches of screams and stuff in our records, but they're usually just like background, or like they would be a layer on top of like the mid, or like under it or above it or whatever, so that it would just give it more umph and like power and girth, I guess. But you know, like it was cool to get some of those, like what would normally be like a supplementary take as like a main. And I think that the music kind of called for that a lot more on this one than normally, I guess, and for like previous releases. So it was nice to be able to like let some different ranges fly and all aspects.
Nice. The album is out May 5th. You guys are going on tour shortly after. Is that just what the rest of the year looks like? Just touring and... Yeah,
just, you know, touring, and I don't know what rhymes with touring, but like touring. Like we've got
more touring.
Yeah, touring, more touring. So we've got this, and then a bunch of unannounced cool things that are going to happen, and they are going to be great and sick, and also very nice. So yeah.
Nice. Who's out on this run you guys are doing coming up?
So we've got us, and then we have like Moss to Flames as our direct support. Shout out to them. Incredible. Can't believe it still. They're awesome. And then we have, for the first few and the first few and last few, we have Invent Animate.
Fuck yeah.
Shout out to them. The best. And we have Unity Texas kind of like rounding out the middle of the tour for us. And so they kind of rotate that 2 of 4 situation, and then we have 4 in Hands that is opening the whole tour. Great up and coming hardcore band. Yeah. Super stoked to meet them and like get to see them do their thing every day.
Thanks for listening to As the Story Grows. Our intro music was written and composed by Jeremy Hunt. The As the Story Grows theme is by Bob Nana. If you like what you hear, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and give us a rating and review. If you'd like to support the show financially, you can join us at patreon.com/asthestorygrows. Be a part of our community and join the ongoing conversation over on Discord. If you enjoy this episode, share it on social media with your friends. Much appreciated, and thanks for listening.
I never thought